But how do you guys deal with the mixed signals? How do you guys deal with? I mean, I feel like to some extent some agencies are just putting their head in the ground and not dealing with all these mixed signals all around.
Okay, so I hear the mixed signals that Senator Favela mentioned.
Or even like the mass testing versus what they said last week. They're not going to do mass testing. That's not something the Department of Health is going to be pushing.
We're going to be doing sentinel surveillance testing. The idea is to test a representative set of the population to get an overall picture without testing every single person.
Okay, but when do you get that out to the public? That this is our plan and this is how we're going to deal with it in Hawaii?
I don't know, I hear about that plan every day, but I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with how well that is permeated into the public.
I think, Dr. Desmond, the concern that we have, well, I have, I'm sure my colleagues will agree, that we are now talking about recovery and starting to open up. But if we don't know the dangers that are still out there because we're getting mixed signals, and one of them is, you just told us that it's they could be asymptomatic for 5 to 20 days, but the quarantine's in 14 days, so there's a 6-day difference. That's another mixed signal to us. But that's the concern we have, is that how can we talk about opening up when not everyone is on the same page, including our own departments, and we get different information? Because how are we going to pass this on to the people that are going to be on the task force, the recovery task force, that need to get this information?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say that I probably misspoke when I said the incubation is 5 to 20 days. 20 days that's an outlier. I mean, most patients, between the time they get infected and the time they develop symptoms, you're going to get 99% of these people are going to become symptomatic within 14 days. So it's reasonable to have that policy. But 20 days, that's an outlier. Now, as far as the mass screenings, the sentinel surveillance that we're going to do, it's going to depend on what we see in terms of outbreaks in our communities. When we do the sentinel surveillance, we're going to get some idea of that, and then there can be follow-on testing guided by what our findings are. And I have confidence in Dr. Park that the follow-on testing in specific communities will be thoughtfully designed. But I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be.
But again, looking at the standards and the program, for example, the inventory of tests that we would need to know if we open up, do we have the supply? Who gathers that information?
I did last week.
So do you do that on an ongoing basis to say that this is how much we need?
And who do you report that to?
Who do you report to on that information?
I report that to the Department of Health.
Okay, can you copy, I guess, is that a weekly report?
No, it doesn't change that often. I don't think it's really necessary to have it done weekly. I'm thinking about something like every 3 weeks to a month.
Okay, I guess that's what she's asking for. She'd like to see an updated, and if it's 3 weeks, I guess it's 3 weeks, but if not, she's constantly having this question. And so if we can just give her the update as it becomes available.
Yeah, I think that the American manufacturing capacity is ramping up, and so we're seeing improvements in the supplies of the testing kits.
Okay, so I just want to get this clear. So our plan, the state's plan, according to what we're gathering, is that it's going to be ramp up contact tracing, right? Then it's going to be the sentinel surveillance.
Yeah.
No mass testing, and testing of only close contacts of those in the vulnerable age bracket. Well, if you were in close contact with someone who was positive.
As we gradually end shutdown requirements and open up the economy and the communities again, I think that we're going to see new cases, and I think that the sentinel surveillance will see where these what communities are being affected, and so that the contact tracing can be done. and testing can be focused. And so we have built up.
No, so can you just
supply.
confirm that or no? So it's going to be contact tracing, and the plan is to hopefully stand up contact tracing so that it can deal with a lot more positive cases, sentinel surveillance, and only testing of those who have of symptoms and those who were in contact with someone who was positive if they're in the vulnerable age bracket.
I've tried my best to answer these questions, but have you talked with Dr. Park about this? Because our mission is to fulfill the needs of the
She suggested we talk to you.
I'm sorry. Well, we have the capacity to do what Dr. Park wants. So what she asks us to do, we will do. And I think that what is done in terms of surveillance is going to be influenced by what actually happens here and what we find in the Sentinels.
You know, I get that, but
And also based
what
on
I'm trying to
national
figure
guidelines.
what we're trying, okay, as legislators that represent the state, we're just trying to figure out what's our state plan.
Okay,
And
so-
that goes back to, if it is our plan to ramp up contact tracing, ramp up the sentinel surveillance, no mass testing, only testing of those that have symptoms, and only test those who came in contact with someone positive that is in the vulnerable age bracket. Is that correct?
Sounds correct. So we're going to be, with the Sentinel surveillance, we're going to follow what happens in communities, and so we can focus control efforts and contact tracing.
Okay, and so sentinel surveillance, that means that if you find it, as you guys do these random tests around the state, if you find it a potential cluster, then you're going to do mass testing in that community? Is that it?
I don't know if mass testing is the right term to use. We will do testing that enables us to discern what's going on, but they may be different from mass testing.
Okay, I guess there's a disconnect between looking at it as a scientific experiment, observing, looking at it, versus the public health concern that we're trying to get on how we deal with it so that people feel like we have some kind of plan to deal with it.
Well, there are national guidelines yet to be developed, and we will follow those. Part of the
Okay, so what's our plan for tourism then? Because if that's our plan now, with the current stay at home, with the current 14-day quarantine, what's our plan as people start to fly in? Because I mean, Senator Kim said she saw flights full starting May 11th.
Okay, well, let me just say that's, first of all, that's far outside of my purview. But let me also say that some of the decisions that we make depend on the tools that we will have. One of the tools that we hope to have is antibody testing. And the implications of antibody testing, we don't know. They're still being studied. I just discovered today that there was a study that showed that when people become antibody positive, they still may be infectious for several days, even though they've got antibody. So our hopes that the presence of antibody might indicate that somebody's immune and no longer infectious and spreading to others were dashed. We need there's a lot to be discovered about the science of this. And so this is not a dispassionate science experiment. We are feeling public health people, and we care about our communities intensely, but it may feel like that it's a scientific experiment.
Well, it has to, somehow the communication has to be a lot more aggressive, I think.
And the testing plan for this.
We are passionate about what we're doing.
Well, a
Because
couple of weeks ago, we asked about, Japson Lab, and I think moving forward, this is why I think it's important to, beef up another lab. And Dr. Anderson told this committee that you would be working with them. So what has been done to date to try and bring that lab?
Well, what has happened is I've inquired about their plans. What are your plans? What's the community you're going to serve? Who's going to take care of these
How
patients?
was that through a letter?
And
Wait, why is that important? Why is that so important? The community that they're going to serve is the state of Hawaii. What other community are they planning to serve?
who's going to be the tests that need to be ordered by a physician. As I pointed out, for the 5 testing labs that we have, they're part of medical systems where doctors order the test, the lab does the testing, and then the doctor takes care of the patient. Japsam has an incomplete plan. I've asked them, I've pointed out to them that it's an incomplete plan, and now it's up to them to make a complete plan. It's not up to me.
Well, the incompletion is that they're not treating, but you're doing surveillance testing, for example. Can they be doing other things?
It should be Department of Health plan to have them as a backup. Why are we stuck in our status quo bureaucratic?
We have
dialogue?
16 people trained to do the COVID-19 testing, and we have a backlog of 3,000 test kits. I'm not saying that we're unable to do this work. If we were unable to do this work, then I might be recruiting.
No, but we should be building capacity at this point.
Because this is not going to go away.
Yes.
What's the backlog? 3,000.
That's the kits that we have, yes.
You don't have enough. You're short 3,000 kits.
No, I'm sorry. We have 3,000 kits, unused kits
Unused kits.
in our laboratory.
Why aren't you using it? Why aren't you using the test kits?
Oh,
Because they don't test, they said.
We are, as I mentioned, we are building up to be able to support sentinel surveillance testing. It'll come. There will.
But if in fact we're concerned about what's out there, and I just took about 2 weeks worth of data and just kind of extrapolating because you give us the total number of tests from February 28th. So if you look from day to day, you're testing maybe about an average of 700 cases a day. So I can see where the backlog is coming, but if you have a plan,
I'm sorry,
It's not a backlog. It's extra
It's a
kits.
surplus.
if
We
you
have
have
a
a surplus, if you have a surplus, why aren't you looking at a plan of how we test?
No,
what
that's
we
what he's
test?
saying, that 3,000 is going to be used for the sentinel surveillance. That's what he's saying.
Well,
They're saving
Yeah.
it
That's
up.
We have-
2,000 a day.
we have built up our capacity.
3,000 kits total that they have.
He's saying
But
that
they
their
can only
capacity-
process 3,000 a day.
The
of
five
all
labs, the
labs.
5 labs can test a capacity of
3,000.
3,000.
3,000 a day,
Yeah.
but he has
But
3,000
what I was
kits.
mentioning is we have inventory in our laboratory
Yes,
for doing
3,000.
3,000
So the
tests. I'm
Department of
sorry if
Health
I was
only-
confusing.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
What about our health workers that are in the hospitals and
Yep.
the care homes? Are they being tested on a regular basis? Because if they're tested today and they're not symptomatic, should we be testing them 15 days from now, 12 days from now, to make sure that they're not carrying the disease to other patients or to whoever? I mean,
Well, the policy for the healthcare workers, as Senator Dela Cruz has mentioned, is not a testing protocol. If they're sick, they should stay home.
no, but you said already they can be sick 5.
So he's saying no. That's his bottom.
Yeah.
The only people they're going to test are those who are symptomatic, and if you came into close contact with a positive and you're in the vulnerable age. That's it.
See, so throughout the U.S. or the world, there are no plans or criteria on how they treat their health workers. And,
Well, certainly.
we know that we don't already have enough health workers, right? And so why would we not make sure that they're tested regularly so we can take care of them if they are sick? They don't know they're sick. They surely wouldn't be going to the hospital and working on patients or care home patients if they knew they were sick. But again, if they don't know during that period that they're asymptomatic, but they are carrying it and passing it on.
Well, why don't we pass on to him the states that have policies where they're testing medical staff on a regular basis so that they can at least review that other states
Even
are
if they're
doing it.
asymptomatic.
Even if they're
Well,
asymptomatic.
particularly for health workers, that's my concern, is that, we only have so many.